Hello everyone, welcome to another video in my new series, The Daily Muppet. I'm going to be putting out videos sometimes daily, sometimes a little less than daily, depending on how much news there is, covering the latest in all things United transfer news, covering news that's out in the media and news from our own sources. So here is the next video. In the video yesterday, we discussed a bit about what Rangnick and Fletcher are actually doing with the squad in terms of evaluating them for who's going to stay, who's going to go, who can they work with, who do they want to get rid of, and kind of figuring out the entire clear out. And that's what we're going to discuss today, is exactly who's leaving, who's likely to leave, and who are there some question marks about leaving, and exactly how are they going to be replaced, because there is a big job on hand for United. But this is a big part of what Ralf was brought in to do, and what Fletcher is here to do as well. So I wanted to discuss it with you. So let's get into the first one. If we look at free agents, and we're talking about who can leave here, the first free agents we're expected to leave are Cavani, Pogba, Mata, and Lingard. And if we look at that, it doesn't change things too much. The same problems we had before in the midfield being shallow are still there. At striker, it makes us very thin, although Cavani has not been playing that much anyway. And in terms of Mata and Lingard, they also have not been playing much and really shouldn't be playing at this point. Lingard probably playing a bit because there is nobody to back up Bruno Fernandes at the moment. So as you can see, if those free agents leave, the places where very thin, this is not to say the rest of these positions are good enough, but the places where we're very thin as a squad are at striker and in the midfield as expected. If we move on from that to the players who are likely to be sold, and all of those free agents are likely to be leave and have been recommended to leave. The players likely to be sold are Anthony Martial, who there's a small chance he could stay pending what happens with the next manager. Eric Bailly, who wants to leave because he is not getting enough play time and is kind of unhappy about that given some of the discussions that have occurred. And Emmanuel Matic, who may want to finish out his career actually getting some minutes somewhere, as we are likely to make signings in the midfield. So as they leave, you can see these problems are exacerbated a little bit. The midfield is even a bit thinner. The center back partnership here lacks much depth. We're not going to consider Phil Jones, as he's just not regular and is not likely to be factored into the decision making too much. And then, of course, at the forwards, you have a thinness developing at winger. And that's something where, I've got the left circled there, but frankly, it's probably more of a right-wing issue. Sancho can play on the left or the right. Rashford's probably better on the left, and Elanga can do both as well. But realistically, a right winger would help to push Rashford back to the left, and something he would like to do, and that I think would suit everybody, as I just don't think he's very good on the right and does not suit his strengths. So this leaves us thin with a lot of positions, and then it gets even a little bit worse as we move on to the next problem. When we're looking at this, there are some question marks. Ronaldo, will he stay? Will he go? Can depend on Champions League. I don't know where he would go if he leaves, but there's a possibility he could leave. Will Donny van de Beek make it at United? This could be manager dependent, but even then, there's no guarantees of him wanting to stay at this point after this much time. If Erik ten Hag comes in, it is likely he will stay. We'll see, and we'll discuss that in a little bit. And the same goes for Dean Henderson, who probably does not want to sit on the bench longer. So what happens then? In this scenario, which is likely a worst case scenario, but not by much, as most of these players are likely to leave and are the players who are kind of being moved out. There's 10 of them here, on top of Phil Jones, Tuanzebe, Andy Pereira, etc. You have no striker. You have the winger problem we discussed. You have 3 senior midfielders for 3 positions. You have Rafael Varane on his own with no real backup, and you have De Gea where you will need to bring somebody in. So this is obviously a major problem. So what can you do? What can you do with this? Well, one aspect of this, obviously there's signings, but we can limit the number of signings by improving on our depth, by actually providing a pathways for some youth that deserve a chance. And this isn't about overrating youth. but it is about utilizing players who need to get some time in the right positions, and in areas where we should and can rotate. Chelsea, City, Liverpool, they've all been pretty decent. Arsenal been pretty decent about actually rotating some of these youth players in cup games and things like that. If we're in Europa, frankly, there's even more opportunity. The youth players I've heard expect to be promoted and get a bit of time are Jimmy Garner, who's having a great season at Forest in the Championship and absolutely should be able to fit in as depth at the 8 position. That provides us with a lot of options there, and this is why I suggest that we will not sign 2 midfielders this summer. Fred, Garner, Scott are all capable 8s, and it is not likely to be a position that we target first or even anytime soon, maybe till next summer. Mengi can come in and back up Varane, although that one is quite risky. He is probably not ready. It would be better if he was a 5th choice center back, so we'll discuss that in a moment. Hannibal Mejbri can come in and back up Bruno Fernandes, who does not need much backing up. And in addition to that, I would add that we will also, as we discussed, Van de Beek might also be somebody who has a part to play in all of this if he sticks around. And then that leaves us with, again, the same problems we have. Winger, striker, goalkeeper, and as we discussed, probably a center back is needed. So that moves us on to signings and who we should be looking at here. My first suggestion is that the club look at some free agents that they may have been looking at. Sam Johnstone for goalkeeper if Dean Henderson leaves would be a smart choice. He's a capable backup keeper and is homegrown and a former United player. Dybala or Dembele, both free this summer. Both players who could fit in on the right. Both players who are a bit flexible as well. I would like us to look at them. I don't know if we will. Signings like Antony and Rafinha could potentially be very expensive and very difficult to bring in, and that would be a problem. But if we were to then get those free agents, the major signings I would look at that are most likely in terms of position are Rice or Tchouaméni in the defensive midfielder position, and there are other possible names, but that is a position we'll target. That really helps shore up this whole rotation between the 6 and the 8, even by adding one person there, with Jimmy Garner coming in. Darwin Nunez is my choice for striker, someone I think who has an extreme amount of potential and is a goal scorer. And then it'll kind of depend on, do we bring in someone like Dybala who can play in a false 9? Does Ronaldo stay and provide rotation there? Does Anthony Martial stay and provide some rotation there in at winger, which would be a big help if he's willing to accept that and can work with the next manager? And then to bring in Araujo from Barcelona, and we'll talk about that in a moment. This would potentially, depending on the Van de Beek situation, leave us a little bit short at 10 and still a little bit short at striker. But the fact is, this is a big job. This is not going to be resolved in one summer. There's a lot of improvement in here. There's a lot that can be done. There's a lot that would change, and this is a good 11 and some decent rotation, but it's likely to take 2 summers to really sort the squad out for any manager coming in, and they're going to need time. But the clear out is necessary. We have to move on. We have to get high potential, good players in these positions and start to balance the squad out. In the next summer, you'd probably be looking at, again, another striker and more in the midfield to resolve this. Araujo is one I really like because his potential could be one where he pushes Maguire and Lindelof to the bench and becomes a first choice player there. We'd also in the future, of course, look at right back with Ethan Laird if neither Dalot nor Wan-Bissaka manage to impress in the long term. So that's where we're at in terms of the clear out and in terms of what should happen. It's a big job. There's a lot to do, but it should be able to be done. It's something that the club should be able to pull off. They should get a lot of this done. It'll start with the defensive midfield. It'll start with the striker. And from there, it's going to be based on what happens with Eric Bailly, who's likely the next position to be addressed, the center back position. After that, the less likely positions to be addressed will be winger and will be another potential midfielder or goalkeeper. But this is very much dependent on Anthony Martial, on Donny van de Beek, and on Dean Henderson and the next manager. So a lot of that is still up in the air and could change. So let's go over to some transfer news that's come up and talk about them. Number 1, Richarlison. This is a name that's popped up 2 or 3 times over the past few years. I don't think he's a potential name for striker. He does not fit the profile we want. However, if Everton go down, he could be available for a fairly affordable price, with them needing to clear wages and potentially even having a relegation clause. He could be a useful striker a useful winger, I should say, who can also cover striker. I wouldn't pass that up. He is a good player, and if we were to sign him to solve the winger and second striker position if Ronaldo were to leave, that would be great, but it would need to be on top of another good high potential striker coming in. So I think there's a little bit of truth to that maybe it's explored, but not so much on there as of yet. I wouldn't really jump in on that. Yuri Tielemans doesn't really fit what we were talking about here. He is not going to be the defensive midfielder, and from what I understand, there are some concerns about his attitude and effort, work rate, certain things like that in terms of fitting in with what is needed at United. Regardless, we're not likely to sign a second midfielder this summer, so I would put it on the back burner for now. And then the last thing is manager. As I discussed yesterday, what's happening with Ten Hag and Pochettino, there's also a great article I put together that really goes in depth on detail, and I would recommend reading it if you want to get the specifics. But one thing that's important is the defensive midfielder, the striker positions are not likely to change based on the manager. However, the winger, the center back, the goalkeeper situation, all of these things definitely can and likely will be dependent on what manager comes in and the decisions they make with the squad players and who they want to target. So just keep an eye on that. And then the last thing is Araujo. He may be using us for a big contract, but the interest is legitimate. There have been contacts. If he does not re-sign at Barcelona, keep an eye on it. Okay? That's all for today. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much.